In this video, I want to show you some of the interesting things about conditions in PHP. We've already seen some basic conditions, and we're familiar with the 6 common conditionals that are found in almost every language, starting off with equality, not equality, less than, greater than, etc. But PHP holds a lot of history dating back to C. Now, C, of course, is a typed language, and it has some interesting typing involved with it, especially early versions of C. And PHP is a dynamically typed language. So there are types, they're just hidden to the user. We don't define them when we're writing our code. And that leads for a few interesting circumstances. Let's take a quick look at those. So here I have some PHP code. I have if1. Now, if1 you would think would be false or not true, or how does that even compute? That's kind of a weird thing. Likewise, I have x equals 0 and x equals false. Well, it's not. It's equal to 0, right? And then I have a test for inside a condition, and this is just going to echo, and it's going to return a true false value because I have an equality operator, but I have a string for, and I have a numeric for. Now, all of these should kind of be weird, and maybe I should get an error message or something. But if I kind of run this, I see first the condition is true. Then I see that the variable x is false, and I get a 1, not a true or a false. And if I look at my code next to my results, I'm seeing that the condition was true. Well, I just said if 1. Well, I want to explain this because this goes back to kind of some of the older days of C when we didn't have a Boolean data type. Now, we had Boolean operators and we had Boolean conditions, but we didn't have a Boolean data type. And so what happened with that was a 0 was considered false and a non-zero was considered true. And that's why I have if 1, the condition is true. It's actually being viewed as not false, thus true, and therefore we get that result. Likewise, when I say x is equal to 0, 0 is false. And so it's showing when I compare it against the false operator, it is showing that it was false. Likewise, when I see for, a string equal 4, PHP is just trying to do some calculation. It goes, oh, well, I can't compare a string and a number, so therefore I'm going to see if maybe I can convert that string into a number and then do that comparison. It's trying to help us out. And this is a problem with any type of dynamically typed language, is that a lot of times the language is going to try to help us out and allow for us to get sloppy code. And almost everyone's going to say, this is just ugly, sloppy code that should not happen. It gets worse when we have some PHP functions. For example, if I want to search on a string and look for a substring, well, the first index in a string is 0, so maybe that's where I find it. So, but that's not false. What happens if I don't find it? Can I return something that's not a number? And the answer is yes. So then how do I test that? Well, PHP does a couple of interesting things that we can look at. And they give us 2 more comparison operators that are outside of those first standard 6. So let's take a quick look at these real quick. Inside my source code, I'm going to add a third equal sign. And that third equal sign is checking first, are these both evaluated to false? But the third equal sign goes one step further, and it's going to check my data type. And so not only is x going to evaluate to false, but is it actually false? And now we're looking at the data type, not just what it evaluates to. I can do the same thing for my second operation where I check to see if my string 4 is equal to the number 4. Does it not evaluate to the same value, but is it also the same data type? I'm going to save this, come back to my file. Remember that it showed that x was equal to false, and then it showed 1. If I reload this, my first condition is true. My x is not showing equal to false because it was a false value when we compare against the actual data type. And the third one gives an error because it doesn't know how to handle that. And so it just shows up blank. So let's do a little bit step further and just kind of verify what's going to happen with this. I'm going to use an else if. And then check it against false. So here when I reload this, I now have an else if, and I'm checking to see if x is not equal to false. And I use that third operator with a not equal and then an extra equality. It goes and does the evaluation and then also checks the data type. And therefore it shows that x is not a false Boolean value. So this kind of is a two-step process, but allows for us to have a lot better results. So here's an example of a function that PHP uses that you might need to use that additional comparison operator. So it has an array search, and we provide a needle, what we're searching for, against the array. And internally they refer to this as the haystack. You actually find this pretty common in PHP when it does a search type thing, that needle and haystack type of parameter values. Now, if it finds that search value, it will return one of 3 data types. And that's where we get a little bit confusing, and we have to be careful. It can return an index if this is an index-based array. It's not associative. It will return the key if it's an associative array, or it will return false if that value is not found. Now, you might say, well, why does that matter? Well, remember, your first element inside of an array is 0. And so it could return 0, and that's the actual element where it found it. And so it did find an item. Whereas, on the other hand, if it returned false, then it was not found. And so this is where we can use this type of search comparison and checking to see, was a value found, was it actually in there, etc. So knowing that about these extra comparison operators will make working with PHP a little bit easier and making sure you actually get the right data types. So knowing about these extra comparisons will make working with PHP a little bit easier because you're going to make sure you're comparing your data correctly based upon values and allow for a little bit better and more resilient code.